It happened in the quiet suburbs of Ohio, a place where winters feel endless and dreams fade beneath gray skies. I had always believed life rewarded hard work, but that illusion collapsed the year everything went wrong. The factory I worked for shut down without warning, leaving me with 3 kids, a stack of unpaid bills, and a wife trying to hold a family together with prayer and coffee. My youngest, Ethan, had been sick for weeks, his small chest fighting for air each night as the hospital machines beeped like cruel reminders of time slipping away. I remember standing by his bed, watching the pale glow of monitors paint my wife's face in blue, and realizing I had no control left. The doctors used words like critical and limited options, and every one of them felt like a nail sealing hope inside a coffin. Outside the window, snow was falling, soft but relentless, and I whispered to myself, "Where are you, God?" I hadn't prayed in years. Church felt like another world, but that night, something inside me cracked. I walked out of the hospital, stood under a flickering streetlight, and said aloud, "Jesus, if you're real, please do something. I'm losing my boy." The wind cut through my coat, the parking lot empty except for the hum of distant traffic, but I felt a warmth start in my chest that didn't belong to the freezing air. I went back inside, sat beside Ethan, and held his tiny hand. For the first time in my adult life, I closed my eyes and said, "I give up trying to fix this on my own. Save him, Jesus." I fell asleep right there in the chair, and when I woke up at dawn, his breathing had changed. The nurses rushed in, checked the monitors, and said his fever had broken overnight. They called it a turnaround. I called it mercy. We went home a week later, and I couldn't stop thinking about that night, the peace, the warmth, the way his pulse steadied after my prayer. Something inside me shifted. I dusted off an old Bible my grandmother had given me when I was 12, the one I'd never opened, and started reading the book of John. My wife noticed the difference before I said a word. I wasn't snapping anymore. I wasn't drowning in fear. We began praying together each night, simple prayers whispered in the dark after the kids fell asleep. A few months later, I got a job at a small auto garage in Cleveland. Not much pay, but honest work. And life began to look almost normal again. Then came the night of the fire. It was early spring, a windy Friday when the world smelled like rain and gasoline. Around midnight, the alarm screamed and thick smoke rolled down the hallway before I even understood what was happening. The apartment next door had gone up in flames, and the old wood walls caught fast. We grabbed the boys and ran outside, coughing, but in the chaos, I realized our daughter Lily wasn't with us. She had fallen asleep with her headphones on. Without thinking, I sprinted back inside. The smoke hit like a wall of darkness. I couldn't see more than a foot ahead. I was shouting her name, crawling on the floor, lungs on fire, when I hit the edge of her bed. She was there, unconscious from the smoke. My vision blurred, and I thought, this is it. I tried to lift her, but the air burned my throat and my body gave out. In that moment, with everything fading, I said one sentence, "Jesus, please don't let her die." Then, through the blackness, I saw light, soft, golden, like sunlight breaking under water. A figure stood at the foot of the bed, tall, calm, and bright enough to make the smoke glow silver. I couldn't see his face, but I knew who it was. I felt a strength surge through my arms. I grabbed Lily and stumbled toward that light. The next thing I knew, we were on the front lawn, gasping in the cold night air. Neighbors said no one had gone in after me. The firefighters arrived 5 minutes later. I looked at my daughter's face, covered in soot but alive, and I knew heaven had stepped into that fire. That night changed everything. We lost our home, but gained something no money could buy. We started attending a small church downtown, one of those humble places with creaky pews and people who sing like they mean it. Every Sunday, I'd tell anyone who would listen what happened in that apartment. My kids began praying before meals. My wife started a journal of blessings, small things like Ethan laughed today or Lily slept peacefully. We had almost nothing left, but we were rich in a way I couldn't explain. Sometimes late at night, I'd still wrestle with fear, wondering if the fire, the sickness, the job loss were punishment. But then I'd remember the warmth that wrapped around me in that hospital parking lot and the light that guided me through the smoke. It wasn't punishment. It was rescue. And yet, even after those miracles, I didn't know that the greatest test was still waiting. Because just when I thought faith had restored everything, a new storm was forming, one that would demand every ounce of belief we had left and prove once again that when human hope ends, divine grace begins.
After the fire, people in our town called us the Miracle Family. News reporters came for a few days, the church helped us find a small rental house, and for a while life seemed peaceful again. But miracles don't mean the storms stop coming. They just teach you where to stand when they arrive. It started quietly that fall when my wife Sarah began feeling tired all the time. She said it was just stress, working extra shifts at the diner and helping the kids with school, but one morning she collapsed in the kitchen. I caught her before she hit the ground, her lips pale and trembling, and I knew something was wrong. The hospital tests came back with words that made my heart freeze. Breast cancer, stage 3. I remember the doctor's tone, kind but clinical, as if he'd said those words too many times. Sarah squeezed my hand and whispered, "We'll get through this," but I could see the fear in her eyes. I drove home in silence that night, the world outside my windshield blurring into streaks of light, and I told God, "You've already saved us twice. Please, not this time. Don't take her." But the nights grew heavier. Chemotherapy drained her body, the bills piled up again, and every time she lost more hair, I felt like hope was slipping through my fingers. I tried to be strong for the kids, packing lunches, doing laundry, reading bedtime stories with a smile, but when the house got quiet, I would sit on the porch and cry. There was one night, after everyone was asleep, when I walked outside under the cold November sky. The wind was sharp, the streets empty, and I said, "Jesus, I know you're real. You saved my son, you saved my daughter, but now I need you to save my wife. If you can hear me, just give me something, anything to hold on to." For a few seconds there was nothing, just the sound of dry leaves scraping the sidewalk. Then I saw a light flicker in the clouds. Not lightning, not a plane, just a faint glow that pulsed once, twice, then vanished. I can't explain it, but peace filled my chest again, the same warmth I had felt years earlier at the hospital. The next day, Sarah told me she had a dream during her treatment. She said she was standing in a vast field of golden wheat, the wind blowing through her hair, even though she had none left, and Jesus stood across from her, smiling. He didn't say anything, but she heard his voice inside her heart, "You will not die. This is not your end." She woke up crying, and from that day on, something changed. Her strength returned little by little. The doctors called it unexpected progress, but we called it grace. By spring, her scans showed no new growth, and by summer they said the words I will never forget, "No trace of disease." We sat together in that hospital hallway, holding hands, tears streaming down our faces, and I whispered, "He did it again." That Sunday, our pastor invited us to share our testimony. I stood on the small wooden stage, looking out at faces filled with pain and faith, and said, "I'm not a preacher. I'm just a man who ran out of options and found that Jesus never runs out of mercy." The whole church stood and clapped, and for the first time in years I felt light. But even then, I didn't realize that God wasn't finished. Later that year, a tornado ripped through our county, sirens screaming, skies turning black. We huddled in the basement, praying aloud as the walls shook. When it passed, we came out to find our neighborhood in ruins, but somehow our house was untouched. The old cross hanging on our front door was the only thing left standing in the entire block. That night I realized something deeper. Miracles don't mean perfection, they mean protection. Jesus never promised life without pain. He promised presence through it. Every trial, every fire, every storm had led us closer to Him. I used to think miracles were about getting what you wanted. Now I know they're about discovering who you need. As I tucked the kids in that night, I looked at Sarah, her hair growing back, her laughter returning, And I thought about the verse we had written on the fridge, "When you pass through the fire, you will not be burned." That was us. We had walked through fire, sickness, and fear, but we were still here, because Jesus was in every step. I don't know what the future holds, but I know who holds it, and that truth alone is enough to make a broken man stand tall. But what I didn't realize was that the greatest miracle of all wasn't the healing or the survival. It was what Jesus was about to do through my family next, something that would reach beyond our town, beyond our pain, and show the world that hope doesn't just survive, it multiplies.
After the tornado, it felt like our entire town had been reset, stripped down to its foundation, both physically and spiritually. People who had never spoken before now shared meals, prayed together, and built walls with their bare hands. Our small church became the heartbeat of the community, feeding families, collecting clothes, rebuilding homes, and somehow, in the middle of all that chaos, God gave us a new purpose. One Sunday after service, Pastor Raymond walked up to me and said, "You've seen what faith can do, brother. Maybe it's time you help others see it too." I laughed at first, thinking he was joking, but he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Start a group. Share your story." So I did. Every Friday night, people would gather in our basement, neighbors, single mothers, addicts, men fresh out of prison, people just like me who had reached the end of themselves. I didn't preach. I just told them what Jesus had done for my family. I told them how he met me when I was angry, broke, and lost, how he stood with me in the fire, in the sickness, in the storm. Week by week, that little gathering grew until we had to move it to the church hall. People started calling it the Hope Circle. We prayed, we cried, we sang songs we barely knew the words to, and something holy always filled the room. One night, a man named Tyler came in. He was a veteran, rough around the edges, eyes hollow from too many battles. He sat in the back, silent, until after the meeting, when everyone left. He walked up to me, voice shaking, and said, "I came here to say goodbye to life, but now I can't. Something's holding me." I placed my hand on his shoulder and said, "That's Jesus, my friend. He's not done with you yet." Tyler broke down right there, and that night became the start of his redemption. From that point on, I realized that the miracle wasn't just that Jesus saved my family, it was that he was now using my family to save others. Sarah started volunteering at the local shelter, teaching young mothers how to pray through panic instead of collapsing under it. My kids began singing at church, their voices lifting like light beams through stained glass windows. Every time I saw them, I thought about how close I came to losing them, and how mercy had rewritten our story. Then one winter morning, we got an envelope in the mail from an anonymous sender. Inside was a letter that read, "I watched your story online. I had given up on God, but your testimony brought me back. Enclosed is something to help your ministry grow." It was a check large enough to build a permanent community center. I dropped to my knees right there in the living room, tears falling onto the carpet, whispering, "You never stop, do you, Jesus?" Within a year, we opened the House of Hope, a small building with a cross on the front and a sign that read, "Miracles still happen here." People came from all over, families broken by addiction, kids who ran away, soldiers haunted by memories they couldn't erase, and every single one of them left knowing one thing: Jesus was real. Reporters came again, this time not to talk about tragedy, but transformation. They asked me how it felt to lead a movement from a hospital prayer to a ministry that touched hundreds. I told them, it wasn't me. I was just a desperate man who said his name and he did the rest. That line ended up on national television, and suddenly letters started pouring in from across America. People shared stories of healing, forgiveness, and hope. Some sent pictures of crosses they built, others sent notes saying they prayed for us every morning. We framed those letters and hung them on the wall of the center, calling it the Wall of Testimonies. But the truth is, the greatest testimony was never written on paper. It was etched in our hearts.
Years later, when Ethan graduated high school, he said something during his speech that made every person in that gym cry. He said, "My father taught me that faith doesn't make life easier. It makes the impossible possible." In that moment, I felt every memory flood back, the hospital room, the fire, the storm, and realized Jesus hadn't just saved us once. He had been saving us every day, piece by piece, moment by moment. Now when people ask me if miracles are real, I smile and say, they live in my house. I don't know what tomorrow holds. Maybe there'll be new storms, new losses, new tears. But I know this: no matter what comes, I will never face it alone. Because the same Jesus who walked through smoke and sorrow with me still walks beside me now. And if you're reading this, if you're standing in the middle of your own disaster, wondering if he's listening, I promise you, he is. You don't need perfect faith, just a whisper, one name, one cry in the dark. Say Jesus, and watch light break through every shadow. I did, and it saved my family when I had lost all hope.